Look at the oceans, choked with rusting steel monoliths crawling across the water, carrying the trivial necessities of an archaic global economy that is, for all intents and purposes, already dead. You have been conditioned to believe that wealth is inextricably linked to this fragile, chaotic dance of cargo ships, congested ports, and the ceaseless exploitation of cheap overseas labor. It is a pathetic illusion, a relic of the 20th century, designed to keep the middle class comfortably sedated with the myth of globalism. We view this antiquated logistical nightmare with nothing short of aristocratic disdain. The reliance on vulnerable maritime choke points, the unpredictable tantrums of geopolitical theater, and the inevitable unreliability of a human workforce are liabilities that true power simply does not tolerate. For decades, the accumulation of capital meant mastering this precarious supply chain, extracting margins by moving physical matter across thousands of miles of hostile ocean. But physical matter is heavy, slow, and stubbornly subject to the whims of the international working class. The elite do not subject their capital to such primitive indignities. What you are witnessing right now, entirely obscured from the frantic headlines of populist financial media, is the quiet, methodical dismantling of traditional global trade. The masters of the universe are no longer interested in importing raw materials or manufactured goods from the developing world. They have found a method to render the entire concept of importation completely obsolete. Why subject yourself to the unpredictable variables of international commerce when you can simply program the very fabric of nature to manufacture your wealth on demand within your own sovereign borders? The era of logistics is ending. The era of biological synthesis has begun. We are standing at the precipice of a paradigm shift so profound, so devastatingly absolute, that it will render entire continents economically irrelevant. This is not about sustainability, nor is it about the philanthropic betterment of mankind. It is about absolute, frictionless control. The cargo ship is becoming a floating museum piece. The true infrastructure of the future is microscopic, entirely obedient, and completely immune to the frictions of the physical world. Enter the realm of synthetic biology, not as a sterile scientific curiosity, but as the ultimate, unrestrained financial weapon. Consider the engineered cell. It is the perfect employee. It does not demand a living wage. It does not form unions. It requires no sleep. And it is entirely oblivious to the existence of international borders. These microscopic laborers represent a workforce of infinitely obedient biological assets, programmed with the cold precision of digital code to excrete sheer profit. We are no longer limited to extracting resources from the earth or relying on the sweaty, labor-heavy supply chains of the Industrial Revolution. We are rewriting the genetic software of microbes to brew industrial chemicals, advanced pharmaceuticals, and synthetic proteins within the pristine environments of localized biovats. Imagine a fortress of gleaming steel tanks humming quietly in an undisclosed location, churning out trillions of dollars in value without a single shipping container ever crossing an ocean. This is the God complex weaponized for maximum yield. The ruling class is literally growing their assets in proprietary fermentation facilities. By manipulating the base pairs of deoxyribonucleic acid, we have transformed biology into a manufacturing platform that completely severs our dependence on the chaotic exterior world. The raw materials are no longer mined from contested territories. They are synthesized from basic sugars and genetically optimized microorganisms. This completely eliminates the geopolitical leverage of resource-rich, but technologically impoverished nations. We are taking the means of production down to the cellular level, ensuring that the creation of wealth is insulated entirely from the volatility of human error and diplomatic friction. The scale of this operation is staggering, yet it operates in near silence. Every time a new organism is patented, a new monopoly is born, one that cannot be replicated by cheap labor overseas because the intellectual property is locked within the genetic code itself. It is an infinitely scalable engine of extraction, functioning with a ruthless, rhythmic efficiency that traditional factories could never dream of achieving. The biological vat is the new sovereign state, a closed-loop system of perpetual accumulation that answers only to those holding the patents. As tens of billions of dollars quietly flood into this onshore biological manufacturing renaissance, a magnificent slaughter is being prepared for the traditional global economy. We are engineering a highly profitable market correction, one that will economically decimate export-dependent developing nations. For a century, these emerging markets have offered nothing but cheap hands and unregulated pollution, holding the developed world hostage with their monopoly on low-cost labor and raw material extraction. That leverage is about to evaporate overnight. When the sovereign elite can brew jet fuel, rare earth equivalents, and synthetic rubber in a facility just outside of their own gated communities, the entire economic foundation of the Global South collapses. We will watch with cold indifference as the sprawling factory towns and massive shipping ports of the developing world turn into rusted monuments of a bygone era. Their populations, once deemed essential cogs in the global machine, will simply become redundant. This is not a tragedy. It is the ruthless, inevitable concentration of absolute power into the hands of a few sovereign tech monopolists. By localizing production through biological synthesis, the elite are systematically starving the archaic nodes of the global supply chain. The capital that once flowed outward to emerging markets, enriching intermediaries and propping up fragile foreign regimes, is now being aggressively repatriated. It is being locked behind the impregnable walls of intellectual property and biological patents. We are witnessing the ultimate decoupling. The developing world will be left holding vast infrastructures of empty shipping containers and useless assembly lines, while the technologically sovereign powers consolidate total economic supremacy. The wealth transfer will be catastrophic for the unprepared, but for the architects of this biological revolution, it represents a consolidation of leverage unseen since the dawn of the industrial age. The destruction of global trade is a feature, not a bug. It removes the variables. It crushes the competitors. It starves the non-essential participants of the global market. The new empires will not be built on the backs of human laborers, but on the invisible, tireless replication of patented organisms, entirely owned and controlled by an aristocracy of sovereign capital. You, as an observer of this impending slaughter, must decide where your capital will reside when the music stops. The era of diversifying across global emerging markets is an act of financial suicide. The traditional portfolio, heavily weighted with international shipping conglomerates, foreign manufacturing hubs, and labor-intensive supply chain infrastructure, is effectively a collection of stranded assets waiting to be zeroed out. To survive this ruthless new epoch, you must realign your positioning. You must allocate your wealth directly into the bedrock of this new reality, the intellectual property of synthetic biology, the companies holding the foundational patents for cellular reprogramming, and the physical infrastructure of domestic biomanufacturing facilities. You are not buying stocks. You are purchasing the underlying source code of future material reality. Divest entirely from nations whose sole advantage is cheap labor. Short the obsolete logistical frameworks that rely on moving physical goods across oceans. Your capital must become as ruthless and unsentimental as the engineered cells themselves. Position yourself with the sovereign tech monopolists orchestrating this trillion-dollar transfer. Own the biovats, own the genetic sequences, and own the localized energy grids required to power these perpetual machines of extraction. As the old world of global trade burns, suffocating under the weight of its own inefficiency and geopolitical bloat, you will sit safely behind the walls of biological sovereignty. This is the ultimate play. Let the masses lament the loss of their fragile order. Let populist politicians weep over the collapse of the supply chain. You will be far removed from their panic, watching the highly profitable market correction unfold, knowing that your wealth is no longer dependent on the chaos of the world, but is being endlessly replicated, quietly and obediently, in the dark, pristine depths of a sovereign biofactory.